Today I'm talking to Chris Holdham. Hello, Chris.
Hi, Vic.
How are you? It's good to see
Yeah,
you. You look
yeah,
nice.
great. Yeah, I know we've had some fantastic weather recently, and I live right by the coast, so I've been spending a lot of time down the beach.
Oh, awesome stuff. Brilliant. So, look, traditional first question, Chris. What do you do?
I run a foraging business, in short. It's an entity that I have set up to promote the use of wild food, to try to reverse some of the damage, so to say, some of the damage, and reverse the ways that humans have evolved to consume food.
Yeah.
It's got a particular ecological incident. It's causing quite a few problems worldwide and globally, and it's not the only thing. However, it's one thing that I certainly feel that I can make a big difference with, and that many people will be able to connect with as well, because everyone needs food.
Yes. Yeah. Good point. Good point. Have you? So, because obviously, as you know, we spoke, and I was saying that I've spoken to a few people who forage, and I forage, not in as much detail as you, but there's definitely a mindset to do with foraging, which is different, isn't it, from the normal mindset about, it's about this sort of observation thing that you do over a period of time, I'm guessing. Have you always been like that?
Yes, I have, and I completely agree with what you're saying. There is a certain mindset to it, and I believe it's something that's innate in all of us, and it's instinctual, and it's something that we've become disconnected from. And I was very fortunate as a child, where I was taken foraging by my grandparents. I used to catch fish with my father, so I had those experiences as a child, which makes it a lot easier for me to reconnect with in my adult life. Because I feel that perhaps people who haven't had those experiences, it doesn't feel quite normal to them, and it's a little bit more challenging to reconnect with those deeper instincts they have. So it is a kind of a particular mindset, particularly when you take it to like the level I have. There's other people, that have taken it further than me, but particularly when you take it to the level I have, there's certainly a certain type of mindset that you have to have to go full bore with it, and it's not something that's everyone is blessed with.
No, I get that. But what I found interesting with this, again, same thing. I used to go blackberry picking with my dad as a kid, and that became the sort of basis of me. And he would tell me stories about him doing blackberry picking as a child, right? So you do make that connection, and then from that, for me, it just sort of obviously sort of spread out from there. But we were saying about this sort of mindset thing. What fascinated me about this, because you have to be in that process all year round if you're doing stuff, because you need to find where things are. You have to be aware of it in the environment, don't you? And a landscape.
Yeah, absolutely. And like ecology, the more you get into it, ecology almost becomes a bigger part of foraging than plant identification. So recognizing habitats, understanding the environment, being able to read it, and understanding as well potentially what's coming forwards, because there's a big reattunement with nature's rhythms. Obviously, our culture follows the Christian calendar, I think it's the Gregorian calendar today. So we follow the Christian calendar, which is another thing that's sort of disconnected us from nature and nature's rhythms. So we have to reattune to nature's rhythms, understand our environments, and be able to identify and know what foods there are available throughout the different seasons. And it's very hard for me to plan my weeks because it's like I'm in two worlds. You know, I'm living in this culture that we're in, which is going by one calendar, but I'm also trying to live my life by the rhythms of nature, which are very inconsistent. And quite unpredictable at times. So,
Yes.
so like this week, for example, I'm sort of planning for a coastal foraging course I've got on the weekend. However, where we've had a little bit of rain, it's a really good opportunity for me to go out and look for mushrooms as well.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm trying to balance it all. And it is something that you need the liberation to do it as well. You need, it's very, you know, if I was working a 9 till 5, for example, to be able to actually engage with nature and the species that come out very regularly, it would be really challenging, and I would be much more dependent on local amenities than what I
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
natural
So,
food.
see, everything you're saying is sort of, we could go down a massive rabbit hole on each point here, because you know, as you were saying, you know, there is a problem with how we've ended up, you know, and we've sort of become this sort of disconnected from things. And of course, and it's not until you sort of look and then realize a lot of the problems that you see within society are part of that disconnection. I'll give you an example of this from my own sort of life. When I was younger, I used to do a lot of walking. And obviously, if you do foraging, you do a lot of walking anyway, don't you? Because I know we met literally walking.
Yeah.
We bumped into one another, didn't we?
Yeah.
But then you get through a period of time like you do, where you're doing your whatever 9 to 5 thing. And of course, you just don't do any walking, and certainly not on a regular basis. And of course, we've got into this thing now of like, well, going out for a walk. Well, people in the past would have just gone for a walk. They would have walked somewhere to get something. You know, it would have been just one of those things that you did because you had to do it.
Yeah.
And it's almost like we've got everything sort of back to front. So, you know, it's this idea of, and I found that until, for me to get back into doing things, I had to walk to do something. I had to go somewhere for me to get that mindset thing in for me. I know other people probably don't have to do that, but I did. And what struck me about this, and this goes back to what you were saying about what you could do for, you know, for society, if you like, for what skills you've got. For some people, teaching them to sort of reconnect, and how difficult it is for some people to do that. You know, is even down to that sort of mindset of getting back to just doing things that people would have done, even that was just sort of walking somewhere to get those things, you know. So when you were saying, I want to go back to something else you said. You were saying about you being very lucky because you used to go fishing with your dad,
Mhm.
you go foraging with your grandparents, and I think that thing of learning almost by osmosis of doing things, you know, you don't sort of sit there and make a note of what it is that they did.
No,
Do you?
it's
It just sort of sucks in,
just,
isn't it?
yeah. What I've come to learn, and I'll just touch on what you've mentioned about people, you know, walking and maybe not wanting to go out after their 9 to 5, you know, and the system we're in, a lot of people are very drained. They get home, they've got all sorts of other things to deal with home life. They're too drained, they need a break, they want some fun. So the thought of actually, you know, spending hours in the woods looking for probably a meager meal for most people is not something that's going to be that appetizing, and
No.
it's completely understandable. And what I've come to learn, what we're talking about with the memories from childhood, the childhood experiences, is that it has a lot to do with attachment. So like
Yes.
our childhood bonds and the experiences we had, and later on in life we try to reconnect with those because they bring us joy to like our attachment system. So those bonds we've had and those experiences, we're actually attached to the experience, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely does make sense.
Like,
Yeah.
we had like a joyful time, you know, fishing with my father or foraging for shellfish with my grandparents. And because of the structure of the way things are, you know, I might have been working a 9 till 5. I mean, I was a few years ago working, building and maintaining golf courses. And like I was saying a moment ago, where, you know, you just want to go out, you might want to have fun. People have got their own ideas, their own expectations of what enjoyment is. I think deep down within us, there's parts of our mind which we find very difficult to control, and it projects things when we're in times of disarray, for example. So it will project these fond memories, these fond childhood memories, happy times, and then we go out to seek those to soothe the distress, essentially, that we're experiencing from our probably quite mundane lives. So that's kind of what I've come to learn. If we're looking at it from quite a deep rabbit hole from an analytical perspective.
Yeah.
And not everybody has had those experiences. So they would tend to seek out other forms of enjoyment which resonate with their upbringing, most likely.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, sometimes I wonder, okay, you know, if you went back far enough, you would have done those things with your parents. But that there's always that thing about the weirdness of grandparents with you, if you see what I mean. It's because if you know, that's one of those sort of strange biological conundrums, that we're a creature that lives far beyond our reproductive years. And it's obviously, there's a social implication to that, obviously, within societies, that older people have more memories and wisdom of things, that, you know, situations that maybe only occur every now and again.
It gets lost and forgotten as the generations move on.
Exactly. So the grandparents are the only ones that probably might have a way of dealing with something that is an unusual event. And interestingly, they've got a strange resonance, haven't they? Because children just sort of often gravitate to grandparents in ways that they, you know, obviously, because if they're with their own parents, there's often things they've been told not to do. You sort of mean?
Yeah.
And there is something else that's a little bit sort of liberating. I'm quite intrigued by all of this, because I think sometimes those memories are what we could sort of say a little bit more sticky. You know, they tend to be there.
So I think the sense of freedom you get when you're with your grandparents is important, you know, in all types of relationships. If you feel constricted, which your parents, you know, are sort of duty bound in a way to, they have to teach you and educate you, and part of that is setting boundaries.
Yes.
When you're under your grandparents' wings, those kind of boundaries can be a lot more liberating. So I think that freedom people often get when they're around their grandparents it's a little bit more liberating for them. You know, sometimes they might say things as well. They can be more open. These are all important things, even as a small child, you know, being able to be open and discuss things, talk about things and experience things.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think they have effect on memory, which is different somehow.
Yeah, definitely. It's a different type of imprinting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously collecting shellfish and stuff like that is a little bit different from finding mushrooms and stuff. Was there anybody who was quite good with sort of, you know, mycelia with
Yeah.
sort of stuff?
Sort of throughout my childhood, mushrooms wasn't one we did too much.
No.
That's something I've learned a lot more in my adulthood, just through my curiosity of foraging. And there's certainly lots of people out there who are very well versed on fungi, and I think fungi is something, mycelium in particular, is something that is sort of taking a foothold. Is probably something we used a lot more historically. There's an ancient guy, they call him the Iceman, I think his name's Osso, like that.
Yes.
And he was one of the oldest mummified people found in some glacier in northern Europe, I believe. And he had a fungi on him, what we call the hoof fungus, sometimes called the tinder fungus.
Right.
That would have been typically used to promote good gut health. It keeps parasites away and things like that. You can also use it for fire. However, believe he was using it for medicinal purposes. So we would have used these things like a long time ago, and we've got a real sort of curiosity, like we were saying, the instinctual, they pass from one generation to the next, and although they might not be in our memory, like they're still there. So today there's a lot of people, fungi making a huge comeback because of the health benefits they provide for our mind, for our bodies, the different flavors and textures you find in fungi. We're mostly used to, you know, your button mushrooms, portobellos in the shops, but when you start experiencing the wild fungi that there's such a diversity of textures and flavors. And as well, when you start learning about the benefits, it really becomes mind-opening. So there's lots of gurus out there, lots of experts, lots of people who are making great groundbreaking breakthroughs about mycelium, how it works in our world, how it benefits our ecological systems, how it entwines itself with other species that exist. And it's a really fascinating area and becoming hugely popular as well. The mushroom courses, my mushroom courses are my most popular courses.
That's interesting.
Out of all of them. And they've kind of become my specialist area. And it's just something that I've taken a particular interest in, and like finding them. It's a real challenge. They don't have a very long life cycle. Typically, a fruiting body of a mushroom, which is the part of the mushroom we would eat, typically you're looking at, you might have a few days, 5 days here or there, some of them 2 or 3, once it fruits, to actually find it and get it in a good enough condition to eat it. And they're not great at reproducing. They're very inconsistent. They're inconsistent when they fruit. You don't always know exactly when. You can gauge it very well, but often you have to keep going and checking locations when you would think they might, and they might not the first time, but 2 or 3 times later they might fruit, and you can get your fungi if you get there on time. But there's a real challenge about it, and I think humans love being challenged, and that's something that I certainly think is driving the popularity for mushroom foraging in our country at the moment. It's much more common on the continent. In other parts of the world, mushroom foraging is, you know, it's in a real kind of fundamental part of some cultures. France,
France. Yeah.
Family will go out, you know, the grandparents will go out with the grandchildren, like what we're talking about, take the grandchildren out mushroom foraging. And you can go in France, you can go into the pharmacies and I think the bakeries as well, and they'll identify mushrooms for you that you're not sure with. So they've got good resources over there, but certainly in other cultures over here, we're kind of microphobes, we're scared. There's a certainly a fear around it, which may or may not be our fault. There's definitely some things that have been induced in us over time to deter us from using wild food. you know, oh, it might be deadly, a dog might have peed on it, I wouldn't get it, come to the shop and trust us and get our food.
Yes, yeah,
So
yeah.
in cultures like France and, you know, even Northern Europe as well, where the knowledge is passed from one generation to the next, and they also have state resources where they can go and get identifications, you know, from mycologists, from experts very readily. In this country, we don't have that. So I think we're kind of a bit more challenged, and we are quite isolated on our own if we're going out mushroom foraging and knowing what to do, what's right and what's not. So it can be quite daunting.
Yes, yeah. So, yeah, because you're saying about France, I got a friend who lives in France, and he lives near a massive sort of woodland. And when I went down there last year, he said, "Oh, it's mushroom time," you know, and there were literally people parking their cars and going out, and you know, he said, "You see," and they sort of, he said, it's quite funny because they're collecting mushrooms, but they don't like to show you how many they've got. Is because obviously they're finding things that are actually they can sell for quite a lot of money.
Yeah.
they don't like to sort of let you know how much money they're probably making off the, you know. But anyway, I thought it was quite funny because it's just completely different sort of attitude.
I recently bought a forage basket because whenever I'm walking around the woods, most people I walk past, they take a curiosity as to what I'm doing, and often I'll come across people, other foragers, you know, some that, you know, they don't do commercial foraging, but I do come across commercial foragers, people that are foraging for restaurants. So I've bought a basket which has got closed lids on it now, because I'd always get people looking into my basket asking, what's this, where did I get that from? I now just kind of a little bit like the friends, keep it a little bit more closed doors. Sometimes I'm more than happy to open up and talk to people. But commercial foraging can be a little bit of an issue in the UK. I'm not a huge advocate of it. I like to try and teach people how to do it themselves. I'm of the view that the agricultural food, the grown food, that should be, you know, the gourmet food. That should be what's in the restaurants, or everyday food should be wild food. You know, we go out and get our food.
Yeah,
the commercial.
I agree with you.
And it's turned the other way around. Like what you were saying, everything's kind of back to front. So for some reason, the gourmet food is now the stuff that you can go and get free in the wild, and the everyday food is the stuff that you have to go and pay for in the shops. It's kind of gone back to front. It needs to reverse round the other way. So yeah, that's my view on that matter.
No, I totally get that. I think that's the thing we've lost, and because obviously I think a lot of this is to do with the fact that we had, you know, an industrial revolution a long time before everybody else, and a lot of people moved off the land, you know, good 100 years before some of the other countries that we were talking about. So there's obviously a massive disconnect about what people knew about the land that they were in and what they could hunt and all the rest of it. Because obviously it's not just foraging, is it? It's also knowing how to hunt various things. And I was interested in this because I mentioned the story about how we met because it was sort of slightly unusual. I was walking one of this sort of pilgrimage trail, which is the old way, and we were sort of in a woodland, I think, at this point, weren't we? Was it near?
Just cutting up a hill through the woodlands on sort of southbound way.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then you appeared out of nowhere with a bag, and I thought, he's got mushrooms in there. But because it was just the way they looked, and I thought, So I didn't say anything first of all. We just got chatting, didn't we? But you said you collected some mushrooms for it was some chanterelle, but it was, what were they?
They were dryad saddle. I was looking for morels, which are like one of the most highly prized fungi. But I had the consolation prize on me, the dryad saddle, which is quite an obvious mushroom even in a bag as well. So I'm not surprised you noticed it.
No, that's right. But the thing is, I'm quite used to seeing people doing that, and I know I do. Obviously, I'll go out for the most obvious ones, but
Yeah.
okay. But it was quite interesting that, because we were literally in the middle of nowhere, really, because I hadn't seen anybody else all day.
No, there wasn't anyone else around. It was kind of
No.
backing out of winter, weren't we? So it's still,
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So when you because we did the thing at the beginning, right? So you went and did the foraging with your dad or your grandparents and your dad, fishing and stuff like that. How much did you keep connected with that? Was it something that you always did, or was there a period of time that you sort of thought, hang on, let's just go back to this?
There was a period of time when I didn't do it so much. It was something I certainly did as a child and into my early teens, kind of on my own when I was out and about. And I used to spend a lot of time in the woodlands, even just going out and walking around for no reason, just going and exploring woods. And then in my sort of mid-teens to probably my early 20s, I got into party lifestyle and never really kind of reconnected with it throughout that period. And I decided that I needed to, it was my early 20s, I needed to do something with my life rather than just party hard all the time. So I ended up building a career in golf course management. So it was still within sort of the realms of working with nature to some degree, much more manicured nature. And throughout my career, I started off at the bottom end of the career, just mowing lawns and stuff. And in my latter part of the career, I was working in the exclusive sector, and we were building state-of-the-art golf courses. And it was really throughout that sort of period. I just had my first child as well. So I was making sort of changes, positive changes in my life because of that. And throughout that period, I was really looking at what we were doing in the environment, and I'd always looked at things in a slightly different way. People are going out and we're strewing down what's weeds on the golf course and putting chemicals out, and I'm looking at it like, this is food, why aren't we using it? There's got to be some better use of it than just going out and demolishing it. We did some really great projects as well, some rewilding projects, and worked on some of the most ecologically sensitive golf course construction projects. And one of those was Beaverbrook. So we did some renaturing, rewilding. The whole site was a triple SI, and there's rare species of grasses that only existed there, and wildlife as well. So we had to sort of create corridors where they're on what they call isolated island biogeography. So there was like small area of grassland that had been cut off from other areas of grassland. We reintroduced indigenous species to link up these different areas so that the insects and the other species, the grasses, can move through the corridors.
That is so important, isn't it? It's one of those things when you think about it, you go, God, that's obvious, but it's one of those things that we just, for some reason, just didn't get our head around until, well, when did I first hear about this? 15 years ago, I suppose.
I think it's relatively new.
It is.
Yeah, especially applying it in the larger industrial scale projects. I think now there's becoming more of a what's the right word, like a sort of a play off. So for instance, to get one of the golf courses built, they had to have a really good ecological plan, and it wasn't quite right. It got stopped by the courts, and about 2 years later they got the ecological plan right, and then the construction was allowed to go forwards. But it had to be, if you want to do this to the environment, you have to give 50% back in some way. And this is where some of the rewilding projects were coming through. But it was around that period really that I started to look at the things we did in a different way, a very different way. And at the time as well, I was really working on my health. My health hadn't been particularly great after all the partying when I was younger. So I was looking at food and how I was able to manage my own health and well-being without the involvement of doctors so much,
Yeah.
through food. And while food obviously became over time a really increasingly important part of that. So I think there's just certain consequences in my life that came about, which pushed me into that direction. And as well, because of my childhood, it was something that I just naturally resonated with. And it wasn't actually until sort of around lockdown time, which gave me the opportunity to pursue things that I was really passionate about. So I gave up the golf courses and decided to reorganize my life and see if I can actually pursue the things that I'm really passionate about. And that's where Rewilding Us evolved out of that. And the whole kind of idea of Rewilding Us is, part of it is the foraging, but a lot of it is as well to do with foundations and mitigating and navigating the society we live in. So the law, land, health, it's all money, all of these aspects that govern our life to some degree. It's finding a way to move away from the system that we're born into and living a more liberating life, but within the boundaries of what our society permits through its constructs of law. Because if you don't do it that way, I think you're just setting yourself up to fail. And what I've come to learn is that the law in this country is very giving if you know how to use it properly. And there's lots of ways where we can be and do the things we want to do. And it's just knowing ways to go about doing that and achieving it in a way that is congruent to the rest of society as well. I think those concepts generally are some of the things that hold people back in life, like I was for a long time. And being able to overcome those mental blockages.
Okay, that's a very interesting point. What do you think? In what sort of way was that for you? Without me, prying too much.
An idyllic lifestyle, an idyllic life would be to have some land, for example, be able to build something on it that I want to live in. I don't really want to live in a standard, bricks and mortar house. Something else. Be able to get my own food and not be burdened with expenses that are unnecessary. Energy is free. So, how do we source that ourselves? There's many other aspects to society which do place burdens on us. And when I was on the golf courses, I used to look around and some of the courses I worked at were in housing estates, and one area in Virginia Water, I think the average house price is £2 million. So I'm renting a room, working on these multi-million-pound golf courses, but renting a room and just keeping up with the bills from month to month, running a car and stuff. And I'm looking around me like, what's going on here?
I know.
So it wasn't the kind of lifestyle when I saw what was going on. And the affluent lifestyle, although it does look wonderful and fun, as a person, an individual, I have my own views and morals, and I think it's really important for us to try and stick to those the best we can throughout our life and live our lives true to who we are.
I agree. I totally agree.
So the opportunity came round for me to really follow that.
Yeah.
And I did a lot of learning over the years as well about law, just through my own personal curiosity about the way the world works, things we're not taught, in our school life, or that's passed down from our parents, probably things that are kind of kept from us to a degree, to keep us in the dark a little bit. So certain aspects that I've built this structure around, and the wild food is one part, and it's a really important part. I went and actually lived in the wild in 2019. I went and stayed on a piece of land for 3 months as an experiment, see how I can do it, if it's plausible, if it's something I can do. And it was fantastic. I stayed on a bit of land, camped in a hammock, and I was still working at the time, so I was getting up and going to work in the mornings, doing quite a bit of foraging. And but I wanted to experience the hurdles I might come across on a small scale before I sort of gear up to go and do that full force. And it was really those kind of experiences. It's something that I've been sort of planning for a long time, and slowly been creating these experiences and the right opportunities, and I've been edged into them. I think we manifest things in certain ways as well sometimes.
Yes, yeah, I agree with you. One of the things I think is quite interesting, I don't know, and it's a slight revelation to me actually over time, was a number of years ago, I started doing a regular sort of fast, a couple of days a week, where I didn't eat very much at all. And over time, I began to realize that we don't need to eat anything like the amount of food that we actually, well, not necessarily food, you know what I mean? We eat a lot of stuff. And then the other thing is, the better the quality of the food that you eat, the less you need to eat. So it starts to, and it's sort of amazing, because you go, right, well, actually, if you look at any other animal, they look incredible. Any animal looks amazing. And they can go without food for a long time. When they eat, It's I'm thinking, well, that's one of those things we've lost within society, and that was something that sort of crept up on me, realizing that, being more aware of hunger, not just, fancy something to eat, not that type of hunger. It's like when you actually go, I really do need to eat now, that type of thing. I need to find something to eat, and so I'm assuming that living sort of wild, if you like, on a little bit of land where you've got to forage your food, and you're sleeping in a hammock and all the rest of it. There's a lot of changes that go on in that period of time for you.
Yes, there were a lot of changes, and hunger, I think the way I would sort of describe what you've said about hunger is, it's kind of like the hunger was more of a hunger for a different life, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's like, our body's talking to us, but in different ways. Like I'm hungry, it's speaking to us, but it was saying I'm hungry for something else. So creating these opportunities. And there were times it was difficult cooking outside as well. And I remember going back once, it was late at night, nothing was open, or I could get to anyway, and the mice had been in my food. It was just and sort of laying there hungry, like it was pitch black, couldn't forage. So those experiences were the exact things I was looking for, to prime myself up to learn more about what it is I need to do to actually make it work properly in the future. So the idea was, I was living in a house before I did it, and then I gave it my notice because I planned to live in the wild in the summertime, and then we'll go back to live in a house in the winter, just for that brief period, which was long enough for me. One of the harder things as well was like attachment. So it's like my attachment to things, to like our conveniences, to just being able to switch a kettle on or have a shower. And like those kind of things were almost more difficult sometimes to deal with.
Yeah. That's boiling a kettle is a good one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because when you're out in the wild, it takes a long time to boil water.
It does. And
sometimes
you don't have any gas.
You just don't realise how much energy it uses to boil something. You know, if you're lighting a fire to boil water, God.
And where I was, I couldn't actually make fires either. So I was just solely reliant on the gas, because I didn't want to give too much up. There was a neighbour house, which was a little bit of a distance, but I didn't want to give any indication that there was someone staying there. So I wasn't having fires. I was just solely on gas, and sometimes the gas wouldn't work or it'd run out. And
But even so, boiling a kettle on gas on a little camping
it can, definitely.
I know. So it's such a revelation, isn't it? Breaking patterns of behaviour and the habit. You know, because again, because I do a lot of creative work with people, and a lot of that stuff is about that. It's about, don't just do what you've done before. You know, do something different, and of course it really makes great changes in you as a person, because you start seeing things differently, don't you? You know, like organisational skills I'm assuming get a lot better.
Really important.
Yeah, of course they are, because a lot of, we've already spoken about the fact that with foraging, it's sort of like all year round, really, because you're walking land and seeing where things are, when, you know, like trees that flower in a certain place, and that gives you the idea that's where slows are, and so on, you know.
You're also preparing for harder times, which is what our ancestors would have done as well.
Exactly.
When you say about organisation, the importance of that, and you know, there's going to be times throughout the year, the primary growing season, where you are contemplating the winter, and there's not going to be much greenery, there's not going to be much food generally around. So how am I going to make this or extend the use of this food that I can get now throughout the year? And organisation with it's just super important.
The other one that I quite am interested in, because I've got a wood burner, and I like to obviously forage some of the wood for that. And again, you realise that actually that is a massive job, like all the time, and especially in the summer. You've got to be sort of getting wood that's there. In, you know, you're not doing it because, again, you've got to prep that up, haven't you? That's all got to be ready. Well, that's the sort of thing. It's like on every level, you've got to be organised. And again, going back to what you were saying before about what society does, the society that we're in, we can get the thing now. You know, we can order the thing, even in the middle of the night. We can buy something.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that's good for us. Even from a mentality point of view, I don't think that's a good thing for us, just to be solely dependent on stuff without being able to sort of plan ahead.
I don't think we appreciate, you know, I think people don't appreciate their property, their things. You know, it's just so easy come, easy go today. There's so much stuff, it's really insane. You know, being able to lie in bed and order food, you know, order a new TV, anything you want, you know, it's at the end, it's just in your fingertips wherever you are. It's really unhealthy.
I think so. I actually, from a point of view of mentality, I think it is. I think it's actually quite troubling. So your Rewilding Us stuff. So let's go back to this thing, because you were saying about you were on this bit of land for 3 months, just seeing what it was that you were, what it was like, what experiences you had and everything. Did you go straight into organising something from that, or were you?
No, I didn't. I then went back into, after that, I then went back into, actually lived in a barn conversion in a forest. The nearest shop was 5 miles away. So it was almost,
Yeah.
it was relatively near to that, which was quite nice. So it wasn't too much of a big jump. And then when lockdown came, and I had a lot of circumstantial changes. My children moved in with me, and so I really had to look at things from a very different perspective, and alternative parenting as well. So I homeschool my children, and
Oh.
lots of kind of alternative, what would be considered alternative methods of parenting that I employ. So it's kind of how, it would, the question I was asking was, how can I live my life, do the things that I want to do, and raise my children the way I would like to raise them? Because it's very easy to be pressured into a position where you just give them up to, state education, and you go back to your 9-to-5 job, and then your life never really changes.
No.
So I was very adamant at this point that I wasn't going to be boxed into a corner and pushed back into a situation which I didn't feel comfortable with at all. So yeah, the motivation was there to just get something up and going. And I just started it. I started Instagram. So I started social media. I hadn't had a smartphone for 5 years at this point, and I thought I'd have to play the game, and be part of this to actually get from A to B. So it's kind of like it's a it's a stepping stone in a way. So I just started it. I went onto Instagram, set up a Rewilding Us account, which was foraging, linked up with lots of other people on there, set up my own website, which I think that's about 26 quid a month. So it's, cheap as chips, and set up the website. And then from there, just started to reach out to people, and try and promote that. And I was quite fortunate that it's taken off relatively well. I think some of it is a little bit about the person. I've also got the life experience as well as qualifications to kind of back up what I'm doing. So obviously working with plants all through my life, most of my life, greenkeeping and working on golf courses. I did a degree level qualification which covered botany, soil science, agronomy, ecology. And so I've got myself into almost set myself up unintentionally. I think we do things in life that sometimes benefit us later on in life. And we don't plan for it, but the things I did with the golf courses and the education I put, that's benefiting me more now than it actually did when I was using it for what it was supposed to be used for.
Yeah, now that is something I definitely, I see this a lot in these interviews, where people have got skills that seem to be, out there somewhere, that suddenly becomes incredibly important at this point in time, right? I'll give you a story about somebody I interviewed a little while ago. I used to teach this guy when he was at one of the schools, 30 years ago, probably. And he was a chorister at a cathedral school. And so he obviously could sing. And I taught him guitar, and he was a good guitar player, very musical. And what I didn't realize until I was interviewing him was that his parents were into amateur dramatics. So he sort of did the usual thing of of just doing loads of gigs and you know, and he did a lot of solo stuff and everything. And then one day he decided to do like a well, he did a solo gig in a pub, and the landlord said, Phil, would you be able to do an evening of Freddie Mercury stuff? And he went, wow, yeah, you know, be a lot of work, but you know, but up for doing that. So he said he gave himself 9 months, and he did a whole evening, you know, prepped it up, and he, you know, he obviously learned the material, obviously got, because he was doing it on his own, he used the backing tracks and stuff like that. And he got the gear, got all the clothes and all the rest of it. And it was so successful that he started doing this as a regular thing. And then he got spotted by a band that was a tribute band that had just lost their frontman. Now, Phil looks like Freddie Mercury, and he sings like Freddie Mercury.
Amazing.
Because he's acted, he can move like Freddie Mercury, right? So you look at that and you go, look, all of these things that were never in place at this point, you know, the acting, the fact he was a chorister, you know, he had a great sort of vocal range and all the rest of it. And it all came together at once, just like totally weird. And that's just one instance, but I see that a lot. It's almost like somewhere in your head, you're getting these, you're getting the ducks in order, you know?
Yeah.
It is weird. It's very strange. Yeah, so I think that's really, really interesting that all of those things that you did for doing golf courses is more valuable than now for you.
And what it was before, yeah, definitely.
Before, that's amazing.
Originally, I was kind of looking back at it like, you know, I've wasted all those years doing that, and now I don't quite feel like that because,
No,
you know, it has been useful. Yeah.
yeah, that's amazing, and I actually think that's quite important from the point of view, as you say, like, because it's a qualification type of thing. For a lot of people, it's like, oh, okay, I feel safe now type. But that is quite an important thing, and sometimes, you know, because I think about this, about, you know, people starting off doing anything that you now, the mindset is such that you just have to have something that says I can do this thing, which I wasn't quite like that when I started off, and that is definitely something that's happened within society, I think.
Yeah, certainly. It's like it's a trust, and I think it develops trust with people. I think
Yes.
in some cases it's, you know, it is justified. You know, with the foraging, there's some people that have got 20, 30 years experience foraging, you know, which is, you know, they've done it day in and day out, and their experience is second to none. They don't have qualifications, but they've got
No.
that life experience. And, you know, then there's other people like myself who are qualified. And in foraging, there are people who are popping up, you know, who think that it's easy and they can just go out and teach and do stuff with wild food. And I know some people that have made some quite serious mistakes.
Yeah.
I know a guy that's given himself kidney failure. He actually teaches what like foraging courses, but he gave himself kidney failure eating oysters from a prohibited area. So we ate raw oysters from a polluted area, basically.
Yeah.
Someone else that's eaten one of the most deadly plants in the country, and, you know, there's someone else that teaches. So there are people that, you know, and trust is important. You do have to be aware of who you're going out with.
Yeah. And again, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because again, all of those things would have been covered in the, you know, traditionally with people, because there'd be certain things that you wouldn't eat at particular times, or certain places you wouldn't go to because that ground wasn't right, but they would have been explained in a particular way. You know, or it's a taboo to eat certain things from certain places and stuff. But yeah, it's cool. So what courses you got running at the moment then? What's your next one you got?
My next one I'm really excited about. I've got a full day coastal foraging cook, and that is going to be the base is in West Wittering area, where we're going to be doing the cooking, and venture out into Chichester Harbour and do coastal foraging. And it's a full day one I'm doing with a fabulous chef called Jacqueline Wise, who's she's one of my favourite wild food chefs, and she's got a great resume. She does fire cookery, runs a nomadic fire cookery school as well. So I'm really excited to be doing that course with her. You know, I'm going to be learning a lot from her as well, from her cookery that she does. And
that's brilliant. That sounds absolutely brilliant. So when's this one?
This one's on Saturday, Saturday the 15th of July. There are a couple of spaces left on that one.
Okay.
Moment. So it's just one that I'm really excited about. It's taken a long time to prepare for. So not everything I do is you know, about pushing and you know, trying to undermine other things that are going on in society. You know, I do also do things that are tailored for different demographics in society. You know, and that does make it fun. Wild food and the gourmet cooking is really interesting part of it, and I think there's a lot of skills there with people with modern cooking and modern cooking techniques, and combining that with food as well. So I think it's a really great way for people to experience, and wild food is a nice way to entice them into that realm. Like what I was saying earlier about maybe some people haven't had those experiences. It's finding different ways to connect with people with wild food. So maybe they, you know, grew up eating in fancy restaurants, nice restaurants all the time. And this is a way for them to connect with wild food. So we do it at different levels. But yeah, my next course, 15th of July, with Jacqueline Wise. She runs Positively Delicious, which is a nomadic cooking school based in Chichester.
All right, cool. Well, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. Awesome stuff. So what I'll do then is I'll put your stuff on the show notes so that people can check that out. And probably, because normally I normally get episodes out on a Saturday, but what I'll do is I'll try and get this one out because I'll have to get all your stuff up on the show notes. That's the thing that's going to take a while. I'll try and get this as soon as I can, so that
yeah, you know, no rush. I've got other courses coming up after that, so
yeah, but that's so good.
Courses and some other coastal foraging and inland foraging courses as well. So
brilliant stuff. Brilliant. Well, I wish you all the best for that, Chris. It's been a nice chat as well.
Yeah, it's been enjoyable.
Yeah, good. And hopefully I might be able to get to something at some point.
Oh, okay.
All right, it's really good. All right then, mate.
Nice to meet you. Maybe we'll bump into each other in the woods again.
Right. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Why not?
All right, you take care.
And you.